In this video, we'll go over some of the hero monsters and support cards which are not very good. That's mainly because they all had very specific effects for very specific situations in the anime that they translated directly into the TCG. And at number 10, we will have the best card on this list, and that's Spark Blaster. This is an equipped spell card which can only be equipped to an Elemental Hero Sparkman, and it has the effect where you can change the battle position of one face-up monster, and after you use this effect 3 times, this card is destroyed. I think this is the only card in the game which has the effect to allow you to use the effect 3 times, as most other cards are once per turn, once on the field, or if they can use it multiple times, they usually require some kind of resource, and don't just say, can be used 3 times. That makes Spark Blaster kind of unique. It's not very good though. Equipped spell cards need to be amazing or borderline broken to see play. And usually, the only ones that do see play either steal your opponent's monsters or special summon. And this one merely changes the battle position of a monster, but you can use it 3 times. And it also has a restriction where it only works while equipped to one specific vanilla monster on the field. So definitely doesn't do anywhere near enough to justify its very heavy restriction, but even then, it's still the best card on this list. And at number 9, we have a Bubble Shuffle. This is a quick play spell card that requires you to control a face-up attack position Elemental Hero Bubbleman, a card with 800 defense that you don't want to be in attack position, and one face-up attack position monster your opponent controls. And if you meet these requirements, you can change both of those monsters to defense position, and then you contribute your Bubbleman to special summon an Elemental Hero from your hand. So basically, you can use this card to stop one attack on Bubbleman, if used during your opponent's turn, and then special summon a new Elemental Hero from your hand. Or you can just use it during your turn if you really want to special summon an E-Hero from your hand. Like, special summoning an E-Hero from your hand is okay, but the requirement to do that is to tribute your Bubbleman, and you need to specifically have one out on the field in order to do this, which isn't very good. Now, you'll see this a lot with the cards on this list, and despite the fact that its effects are okay-ish, the thing that really makes this card bad is that it requires a very specific monster in order to use its abilities, which is generally a huge detriment to a card's viability, because of how hard it is to get a specific monster on the field while having a specific card in your hand that interacts with it, like Bubble Shuffle. And unless a support card does something amazing, it's generally not worth running incredibly specific cards, like Bubble Shuffle or Spark Blaster. And at number 8, we have Terra Firma Gravity. During your opponent's battle phase, if you control the fusion monster Elemental Hero Terra Firma, all of your opponent's level 4 or lower monsters must attack your Terra Firma, or they cannot attack otherwise. Now, Elemental Hero Terra Firma is an E-Hero fusion monster who is basically a 2500 attack beatstick during your opponent's turn, and has a pretty terrible ability to just gain attack by tributing one of your other Elemental Hero monsters. It's not a very good fusion monster, and its specific trap card dedicated to it isn't very good either. It just makes level 4 or lower monsters attack it, or they can just choose not to, because it doesn't even force them to attack and destroy themselves. So at best, it can just stop your opponent's battle phase, which isn't half bad, assuming all of your opponent's monsters are level 4 or lower. But that's kind of it. You need a very specific bad fusion monster on the field, and at best it can stop your opponent's battle phase. There are so many other trap cards that can do what this card's trying to do but better, like Battle Mania for forcing attacks, or Threatening Roar to stop a battle phase, which means it's almost never worth running this card. And at number 7, we have Hero Metal. This is a trap card that can't be activated normally, and can only be activated if your opponent destroys it by a card effect while it's set on the field. Then you can shuffle this card into your deck and draw a card. Now, the theory behind this card is to bait one of your opponent's effects that are destroying your back row, and if they destroy this card by mistake, you get to draw a card, and waste your opponent's destruction effect. Although if your opponent is not destroying your back row randomly, then this card is dead on field and can never be used. Now, there are 2 other cards, called Jar of Greed and The Legacy of Yatagarasu, which are trap cards that allow you to draw 1 card, and can be used whenever you want, which fulfill the role of this card but better than what this card is trying to do. Because if your opponent activates an effect to destroy your back row, and they target a face-down Jar of Greed, for example, you can just activate Jar of Greed in response to that destruction effect, and then draw one card anyway. So it fulfills the same purpose of being a bait card for your opponents to destroy with one of their effects and waste it, and being able to draw a card off of it. But it also, you can just activate Jar of Greed whenever you want to draw a card. The only advantage Hero Metal has over Jar of Greed is if it's destroyed the turn it's set, like during your end phase, because then you can't chain Jar of Greed to that kind of destruction effect. So there's almost no reason to play Hero Metal, as it's just kind of a bad card. And at number 6, we have Feathershot. This is another one of those incredibly specific E-Hero support cards, where it only works on Elemental Hero Avian, and when activated, during this turn, Avian can attack a number of times equal to the number of monsters you control when this card resolves. But it cannot attack directly, and your other monsters can't attack the turn. Now, Elemental Hero Avian is a 1000 attack vanilla monster, so there's good chances that the other monsters you have on your board probably have higher attack than it, and you're basically just giving up the attacks of your other monsters in order to allow Avian to attack multiple times. And Avian isn't even used for attacking. It's basically only used in hero decks as a fusion material for fusion monsters. Now, here's the thing about Feathershot. It will count the amount of monsters you have when you first activate this card. So, if you get rid of all those other monsters through like link plays or other extra deck plays, your Avian will still have all of those attacks, even if the number of monsters you control is less now. But it also can't attack your opponent directly, so you can't really set off any kind of good combo with it. This is kind of a really bad card that's overly balanced while already having an incredibly difficult requirement of being used on a specific bad vanilla monster. And at number 5, we have Clay Charge. This is a trap card that only works with Elemental Hero Clayman, and it has the effect where if your Clayman is targeted for an attack, even if it's face down, you can destroy your opponent's attacking monster and destroy your Elemental Hero Clayman, and then you can inflict 800 points of damage to your opponent. So, for the low price of needing a specific vanilla monster on the field and destroying that card, you get a Sakuretsu Armor-like effect, and get to inflict 800 points of burn damage to your opponent. Which is to say, that's not very good. Having a specific monster on the field with a specific trap card set is already hard enough to accomplish. But on top of that, it also destroys your own monster with this card, all for a little bit of burn damage. Like, if this card didn't destroy Clayman, it would probably be the best one of these incredibly specific Elemental Hero cards on this list. But since it does destroy Clayman along with your opponent's monster, it's one of the worst. But the reason this doesn't have a higher spot than just 5 is because at least it does destroy one of your opponent's monsters, which is technically a good effect. Now, let's continue on with this list with the other 4 cards I think are just a tad bit worse than Clay Charge. And at number 4, we have Elemental Hero Poison Rose. Poison Rose is the ranked up version of another not very good E-Hero card called Elemental Hero Nopes. This is a level 3 effect monster with 600 attack with a battling effect, where each time this card inflicts battle damage to your opponent, it gains 100 attack but loses 100 defense. And if you control another Elemental Hero monster, this card can attack directly, and your opponent can't choose it as an attack target. Now, its protection isn't half bad. Not being attacked as long as you control another E-Hero monster means it can actually get a little bit of poking damage done, but its effect of gaining 100 attack each time it does damage isn't very good, and on top of that, it even has the downside where it loses defense for no reason. Now, this card also has its own specific support card, which allows you to tribute this card in order to special summon Elemental Hero Poison Rose from your deck. And Poison Rose is a worse card. It can only be special summoned through the Rosebud spell card. Each time it inflicts battle damage to your opponent, it gains 200 attack and loses 200 defense. Only 100 more than its base version, but this card doesn't have the protection that Nopes has. In fact, it has the opposite protection, where your opponent can only target Poison Rose for attacks, and only has 1900 attack, which means it'll probably get destroyed very easily, as a 1900 attack Beat Stick, which can gain 200 attack each turn, is not worth the summoning requirement of a specific card being tributed with another incredibly specific spell card. It's just way too much effort to bring out an incredibly mediocre monster, especially when its base version is probably a better card anyway. And at number 3, we have Hero Barrier. This is a trap card which has the effect to negate one attack, and only if you control a face-up Elemental Hero monster. Now technically, negating one attack is a good effect, but this has got to be the worst trap card in the game for negating an attack that doesn't have a negative effect. Because basically all other cards which negate attacks also do something else in addition to it, like Magical Cylinder, where it negates the attack and then inflicts burn damage to your opponent, or Negate Attack, which negates the attack and then ends the battle phase. So it stops all of the attacks for that turn, and neither of those two cards requires you to have an Elemental Hero on the field, or any other specific monster. They're just straight up better and easier to use, which is why I gave Hero Barrier a pretty high spot on this list. And at number 2, we have Elemental Hero Neo Bubbleman. The reason this card is at number 2 is because you actually can't summon this card normally, because it requires a banned card, Metamorphosis, in order to bring it out for its intended summoning method. Otherwise, you have to use cards like A Wild Monster Appears in order to cheat this card out of your hand. It's basically unusable, but let's go over its effect assuming we could use this card. Now, in order to special summon this card, you need to have Elemental Hero Bubbleman on your side of the field, Metamorphosis, and this card in your hand, so that's 3 specific cards right there. And then you send Bubbleman and Metamorphosis to the graveyard in order to special summon this card from your hand. On the field, this card's name is treated as Elemental Hero Bubbleman, and if it battles an opponent's monster, you can destroy your opponent's monster at the end of the damage step, which means it has to survive that battle in order for its destruction effect to go off and not die itself. So if you crash into something with more than 800 attack, which is basically anything because that's super low, then it will die but take out that monster in the process. So like a worse version of Yomi Ship, a card with the same effect but better stats, and an easier summoning requirement. Now, how this effect is supposed to be used is with the equip card called Bubble Blaster, which is another one of those incredibly specific equip cards which can only be equipped to an Elemental Hero Bubbleman, which this card's name is Bubbleman while on the field, and will increase its attack by 800. And if that Bubbleman would be destroyed by battle, you can destroy the equipped card instead and take no battle damage from that battle, which is also not very good, because for the low price of sending 2 specific cards to the graveyard in order to special summon the specific card from your hand, and then equip it with a very specific equip spell card, you can then destroy one of your opponent's monsters by crashing into it, but then you lose your equip card after that. That is to say, it's not very good. Terrible card. But there is one card I think is worse. And at number 1, we have Burst Return. If you control the specific level 3 vanilla monster on the field, Elemental Hero Burstinatrix, then you can return all of your face-up Elemental Hero monsters on your field to your hand, except the Elemental Hero Burstinatrix. So this incredibly specific E-Hero support card requires you to have a very specific monster on the field, and only has a bad effect. E-Hero monsters don't want to return to your hand normally, and this card can only be useful under incredibly specific circumstances, like if all of your hero monsters had their effects negated, or their attack and defense were set to 0 permanently for some reason, and you didn't want to use them as fusion materials. Then you could use this card to return them to your hand, and then use them for other things. Otherwise, it's just a card that's really hard to activate and has a bad effect. And that's why I put it at number 1, because at least all the other cards on this list had positive effects. Things that actually did something to your opponent, or even the unusable Neo Bubbleman is more useful than Burst Return. Alright, and that's the list. If you know of any other bad hero cards, or any other archetypes that have a whole bunch of bad cards that I should make another video about, I'd love to hear about them down in the comments.